The holidays are supposed to be a time of celebration and joy, but it can be challenging when you are taking care of someone who is sick or disabled, or when you're grieving the loss of someone you loved. This period of time highlights how different your life is. Lance and I were stuck in the unknown for decades with his health, and we felt like we were often a spectator to all the joyous celebrations around us. What was there to celebrate? It can be easy to become bitter during this time. So, I want to talk about some of the ways we handled getting through the holidays then and some of the things that I'm doing now to get through them.
Whew, holidays. Okay. I think the holidays carry so much weight. And funny enough, when we first talked about doing this episode, I thought about, typically when people refer to the holidays, they're meaning Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. But probably a lot of people have different emotions attached to different holidays. So this can encompass the entire year, whether you know, did something special with someone you love on things that most people wouldn't make such a big deal of, but maybe it's Valentine's Day, maybe it's the 4th of July, maybe it's Memorial Day, maybe it's, my family, we for years had a huge St. Patrick's Day party, and we're not Irish, but it was such a huge fond memory for my kids. So when we stopped doing it, they were kind of sad, and I just was too busy. But I think about these can come up all the time. So I think it's good to talk specifically about the winter holidays, but these things can come up all year long. And so I think this is important that we're talking about it. So maybe people have a better chance at being prepared when something that carried a lot of memory or a lot of weight comes back around and smacks them in the face. So good conversation to be had.
Well, and the winter holidays too, the days are shorter. So there's not as much light. And I think people deal with that too. I am noticing it more since Lance passed away, that winter is harder. It never really bothered me before, but ever since he passed away, the shorter days just really get me. And that, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, those all fall in that time frame.
Yeah, that certainly doesn't make it any easier to deal with when I think some people just even struggle with mild depression during the winter anyway. So it compounds that. And I think you feel it maybe a little bit more deeply. Um, I think one of the things that carries a lot of weight during the holidays is just the tradition. So there's some expectation kind of tied up in that, and something that, you know, is associated with happy memories or good memories. And so those traditions can become very important, and some of them are very formative. So, those are kind of hard things to let go. I was thinking about your situation, and as you were caring for Lance and his health was declining, were there traditions that you guys had that you were able to, modify or change or kind of adapt to as he became sicker? And what kinds of things were you guys able to do despite his declining health?
Because he got sick so early in our marriage, we didn't really have the opportunity to start traditions that we carried all the way through. So the main thing for us was the meal. And even though he ended up with dietary restrictions the last decade of his life, I still always made a huge meal, and I made it a big celebration around the food. That was always something that we did. So I guess that was our tradition. And because the meal was such a big deal for us, there was a period of time when we invited any of our friends who did not have someone to spend the holidays with. And so we would just have a whole house full of people who were there because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So that was kind of our tradition for a while too.
I was very fortunate my whole life to live around family and be close to family. And so I'd never experienced Thanksgiving with anything other than my family. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable with the idea of that. But as I've gotten older and my life has changed, and my husband travels for work, so he's not always home on holidays. And having my first couple Thanksgivings without him here, or having family that have moved away. I have a couple children that have moved away. It's making me really appreciate people that have carried on the tradition that you did. So I think that's really cool that you guys opened up a space for that, that not only filled a need for you as you were going through changes in your life and needed that just that love and companionship and kindness and joy around you, which was brought in, by sharing your table with other people that maybe were going through the same thing. I just think that is really, I don't know, I think it's very admirable that you guys took that step to not just include others, but then to kind of fill your own cup by having extra love and joy around you. So I think that's a really cool thing that people can do, is reach out to someone else who's struggling, and then you're all together, and maybe that doesn't hurt so bad.
And we were creating our own environment. We were creating our own celebration in the way that worked for us. So it didn't feel so in your face like when we celebrated with people who weren't dealing with anything.
I can imagine that was comforting to an extent. Another question that I thought of when we was thinking about this topic is just how maybe it changed as Lance's health declined and as his dementia progressed. I just was thinking about it, when both of you are cognitively aware of the loss of the holidays, and there's expectation and there's tradition and there's all the things that you did before, maybe that's a little more challenging than only one of you realizing that there was that much loss. And like you had talked about, the bitterness that you have to fight off. And I kind of equated it to, and this is such a poor example, but this is what I was thinking of. So when my kids were very little, I could go Christmas shopping for them with them, and they had no idea that I was buying them gifts. And it didn't matter what I bought them. They were just happy to open a gift, and they were thrilled. And so that was kind of fun. It was a little easier because I didn't have to make time. I didn't have to hide gifts. And it was kind of ridiculous that I was even wrapping them, but they liked it. As they got older, there was more pressure because I knew they had certain things they were maybe expecting or wanted. There was, well, will they actually like this? Will they be disappointed? I had to make time to go without them. I had to hide things. So it was more complicated, but there was also the reward of them being more aware of what was going on. So the practical element of being able to Christmas shop with them, I missed that to some extent.
As you were talking, it just made me think, here's another way that my life was the reverse of raising children, because while he was on hospice, I wasn't sure what to get for him. And so I would show him what I was thinking of buying for him. And if he really reacted strongly that he liked it, then I would buy it for him. And when Christmas came around, he thought that I was just the best gift giver in the world because he got everything that he thought was so cool. He had no idea that I had actually asked him before I bought everything.
He was picking out his own gifts. That sounds to me like having a 2-year-old in the cart and you say, do you like this toy or this toy? And they pick it. And they're so thrilled Christmas morning. Oh my goodness.
Well, I think in some ways, actually in a lot of ways, it was harder on me because when he was still cognitively aware, we were a team. We could plan the holidays together and we could do what worked for both of us. And then as his dementia got worse, the complete responsibility fell on me to take care of everything. And I wanted it to be really special because he loved the holidays. So it was easier on him. It was harder on me. But looking back, I'm so glad that I did it the way that I did it. And I made a conscious effort every year to make it very special for him.
I can remember you setting up the Christmas decorations, and they were up for a long time because he liked them so much. I remember I came over and you said, "I'm just gonna leave them up because he really likes them," and he was so thrilled. He'd just look at them and say, "Those are really pretty."
He looked, yeah, that was during hospice. I left them up until he passed away. So they were up from November until September of the following year. And I think in July, he looked at the calendar and he looked up at the decorations and he looked at me and he said, "Isn't it July?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why are the Christmas decorations still up?" And I said, "Because we like them. They're sparkly. I can take them down if you want me to." And he said, "No, I like them. I was just curious why they were still up."
Thinking about the holidays, and we kind of talked about the holidays through the entire year. Um, were there other holidays that you guys had celebrated that were maybe more challenging to get through? Or were there holidays throughout the year that you were able to celebrate that didn't carry as much weight emotionally as maybe some others? I didn't know if you were able to pick up anything along the way that could just be fun and didn't carry a lot of heavy memories with it, or if you were just surprised by certain holidays that did carry more weight than you thought they would.
I think any of the holidays where there are get togethers with your friends or family, those have always been hard. They were hard all the years that Lance was sick, and they've been hard since he passed away. And Veterans Day hits me every year because he was a veteran and he never really made a big deal out of it until he was disabled. And then every year on Veterans Day, he wanted me to take him around to get all the free things that the veterans get every year. And so we would spend the day just going around and getting all the freebies for the veterans and having people tell him, "Thank you for your service." And he just thought that that was such a cool thing. And we would get home and I would be exhausted and he would just be so happy because he got to do that. I didn't do it with him the last probably 2 or 3 years of his life because it just got to be too hard getting him in and out of the van with the wheelchair and how disabled he had become. But I did still celebrate it with him at home. I would thank him and people would send messages and thank him. And then we would have a meal. And so it was still a big deal. That one's been hard. That surprised me how hard that one was.
I think about certain things like, well, I told you about the silly St. Patrick's Day party we always did. And I've missed it, as my kids have gotten older and moved on. And I've thought, well, I wonder what that will be like for them when I'm gone. Maybe it will be something that will be, will hit them or surprise them, that it was stressful. Another one is 4th of July. We celebrate 4th of July probably more extensively than maybe we should. I don't know. But we make a really big deal out of it. So I think about that. Is that something they'll carry on, or is it going to be hard? Like I said, when I'm gone, or if something were to happen to one of my kids or, my husband or something like that, how would I be able to get through that? Because we have so many memories attached to that. So I think that's that memory attachment. But what did you do when you realized that Veterans Day was harder than you had expected?
Well, now I know that it's coming. And so one of the things that I've learned is that I need to plan ahead. I need to prepare for the possibility that it's going to hit me hard again. And so I usually plan for Veterans Day and the day after that I'm not going to have anything going on just in case I need to rest. Because I do still, when things like this get me down, I'll spend the day just watching movies or sleeping or whatever it is that I need to do. I usually will get out and go for a walk because being outside always makes me feel better. But I do try to spend those days alone because as it becomes years after he passed away, it's been 4 years now, people don't want to hear about it anymore. And so I make that plan to just process it on my own. Or if I've got a friend who is also dealing with it, then we will plan for a talk or something like that. But just, I think doing what you need to do to get through the holiday, having a plan in place. And I always silently thank Lance. I do write him letters sometimes on those days because it's just how I'm feeling that day. It just depends on the day.
I was just thinking that all the years that you were protecting Lance and kind of holding space for him as he, as his illness progressed and you became his advocate and his protector pretty extensively. I was just thinking that that was practice for doing it for yourself. Now that he's gone, you're clearly holding space for yourself and you're protecting yourself in a way that is so necessary. And I think people don't um, take that quite as seriously as they should, that you have to protect yourself so that you can um, continue to navigate life and not get just taken out. It's like a little bit of a life raft, right?
Well, I think what happens is we get told so often by people that we should be over it, and we start to feel like there's something wrong with us. But when you start talking to people who have been grieving for a long time, you realize it's not something that you feel every single day, because I don't feel this every single day. But there are certain times of the year, and there are holidays, other holidays, there are anniversaries, and other things that happen. The first person that I want to talk to is Lance. Every time I hit a milestone, anything in my life, Lance is the first person that I still think of. And that's not wrong. And I'm so tired of society telling us that grief should only last this amount of time, and then you're not allowed to talk about it anymore. That's not okay.
That seems kind of counterintuitive to me. I would think that the more that you process that grief, the faster you're going to heal. And that by holding back or trying to stifle that or pretend like it doesn't exist, that just um, draws out the more challenging elements of that grief process and maybe makes them more intense than they would be otherwise. So you're taken out for a week instead of a couple days when you least expect it. And that can really impact your life as you're trying to move forward. I imagine that would make it more challenging.
Yes. In fact, I just talked to a friend this morning who is grieving. Her husband's been gone almost 3 years, and it hit her really hard this year. And she's, even when you have people around you who are supportive, nobody understands quite as well as someone who has already been through it. And I don't know, there's so much wrapped up in it. You don't want to be a downer. You don't want to be the one ruining everybody else's celebrations. And so I think that we tend to isolate then too, because we don't want to be the one who ruined everybody's party.
I was thinking about when you're going through these challenges, and it's kind of tied in with what you just said about not wanting to, be the wet blanket on someone else's celebration. Um, Thinking about while he was sick, while you were caring for him, while you were going through hell, and so was he. How do you keep from getting resentful or bitter toward people who aren't struggling, who are happy, who are filled with joy, who do have um, all this positivity and brightness going through the holidays, and you're struggling and you're exhausted and you're watching your husband's health decline? It's not exactly fun. And so when someone else is beaming and joyous, and which in all fairness to people, I get that. I've been a Pollyanna. We've talked about this, and knowing you has helped me to understand that, like, maybe not everybody wants that right at that moment and to read the room a little bit better than maybe I have in the past. how did you guard yourself from becoming resentful?
Well, there were times when Lance and I did feel resentful, and it was in the beginning of his illness because things were changing quick enough, and we were still in our 20s, that we were unable to give each other the gifts that other people were giving. We were unable to take the trips that other people were taking because he had limitations. And we had people in our life, mostly family members. There were a few friends too, who didn't seem to understand how hard it was for us and just expected us to be happy for them in whatever they were doing. And not saying that I'm not happy for people and the things that they have, but when you know someone is struggling, really, you should know your audience. It just felt so in our face at the time that these were things that we could never experience again. So eventually, what we did in that case was we stopped celebrating the holidays with people who didn't respect the fact that we were struggling so much. And that's just how we ended up living out the rest of our life. I would say probably the last 15 or so years of our life, we didn't celebrate the holidays with anyone who didn't understand what we were going through.
I think it's fair to say when you have people around you who do have a lot to celebrate and they're celebrating, but they also recognize that you're dealing with loss and they like check in on you and touch base with you all year long and maybe even through the holidays. Are you okay? I would guess it's easier to celebrate with those people than the ones who are oblivious and ignorant, and maybe they try to diminish the struggle or the impact of the challenges that you're going through, or they're dismissive of your hardship in some way. So I think maybe it's not so much about people celebrating as it is how they are the entire rest of the year that impacts how that comes across to you.
Yes, I would agree with that completely because I even find that as I move forward in my life that I'm not spending time with people who are not there to support me the rest of the year. If they're not there for me during the hard times, I can't be there just to celebrate with them. And we've talked about that before too, that that's not what life is about. It's not about only being there to celebrate the good times. It's being there for the good and the bad times.
You have loss and grief that you're dealing with, but the years of illness and care, you guys were together and you loved each other. So that wasn't nothing.
No, it wasn't. And when I look back on those years, I am so thankful for every holiday that I had with him. And I'm glad that we were real. And I'm glad that we celebrated in the way that worked for us. And I wouldn't change it. And as I move forward, um, dealing with the holidays, I'm just taking them one at a time and being intentional about it. I talk about being intentional a lot. And I know that the holidays are coming up. So I am making a plan for what I am going to do to get through the holidays this year. And then I am making a plan for what to do after the holidays are over because I have found that no matter what, I need to be prepared for either a good day or a bad day after an event has passed because I never know how it's going to hit me. So I just prepare for that. I plan that the next day after whatever the celebration is just going to be my day to do whatever I need to do. And that's actually been working for me. So
That's that's holding space for yourself. Good job. I'm proud of you.
thanks, Jenna. Well, I hope that this has been helpful talking about some of the challenges of the holidays. And the next one, we will talk about finding joy in the holidays. So thanks for joining me, Jenna, and I will see you next time.
All righty, bye.